All right, so I'm doing my meditation today on James 2, 8 through 10, which is, if you really fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Or, if you really fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. Whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become accountable for all of it. So the whole thing is kind of about partiality, and I think that's kind of hand in hand with racism, showing partiality in who you decide to love as neighbors. So I thought that was a really good one. And are there any prayer requests?
Our presentation. Is that on work after
All right. Well, I guess let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask you to be with us today in class and to help out with the presentation, to give them comfort and strength in presenting. We also ask you to be with Dr. King, who's sick today, and please help her to get well and make a quick recovery. And we thank you for everything that you've done to get us here today, and that you will continue to do in our lives. And we ask all these things in your name. Amen. Okay.
Is that for sure recorded? Okay. We are the Native American subculture, and this is our presentation. Before we get started today, I'm going to read you a Native American prayer. And so this is kind of just an introduction. O Great Spirit, whose voice I hear in the woods, and whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me, I am small and weak. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may understand the things you have taught my people. Let me learn the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. I seek strength not to be greater than my brother, but to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me always ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so when life fades as the fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame. So just think about that prayer as we're talking about the Native Americans, because it does talk a lot about their culture. And today we have a talking stick, because Native Americans use talking sticks in all of their ceremonies, and only the person who has a talking stick can talk. And if you guys have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll throw you the talking stick and you can ask it. And then Jackie is going to explain the food and you guys are going to eat.
Okay, so afterwards you can go and help yourselves, but there are a few dishes. So the soup is called Three Sisters soup, and there's a main dish with Three Sisters as well. The Three Sisters are corn, beans, and squash, although we kind of try to use sweet potato for the other one. But the whole point is that they used to do companion planting, so corns, beans, and squash, when they would plant together, they would all help each other grow because they all had different types of vines and stems and whatnot, and they're also really nutritionally balanced along with whatever meat that they would hunt for. And so they're used a lot in Native American food. There's a thing called fry bread. They're those little pieces of fried dough, I guess. They would normally just be plain flour and baking soda and whatnot, but and they'd use it as a staple, as kind of their own bread, and then you can use them for tacos and things like that. But we decided to make one of their variations, which is a pumpkin fry bread. Actually pretty good. And they would always eat fruits, nuts, and jerky, and that's about it. So you guys can go and help yourselves to food.
And then while you guys are eating, we're going to play a slideshow for you of Native American pictures, and it also has Native American music. So we're just going to kind of let you guys sit and eat and reflect for a couple minutes.
Makes more sense.
And the fried bread is really good. I don't know if you like it, but it's actually super good. Okay. So we wanted to give you guys a couple minutes because in Native American culture, when they're eating, they try to focus 100% on eating, and they try to think about the animals and the plants who have given up their spirit for the Native American to eat. So we don't really have time to give you guys full time to do that, but we just wanted to give you a couple minutes of that. So today we are going to sociologically define Native Americans for you as a minority group, and we are going to explain the core cultural elements of their subculture. We are going to explain to you the past and current oppression of Native Americans along with their core values, and we're going to have a little bit of story time later on, and then we'll conclude and tell you what we're going to do next class. Okay, so how are Native Americans sociologically defined? We did this in a way that would showcase them as a minority group because they are a minority group. So we just decided that we would go through the 5 characteristics of a minority group with you guys. So Native Americans are easily identifiable. They have biological characteristics like a lot of other races do that set them apart from the dominant race. They have different gene structures. It's been shown through research that Native Americans do have different gene structures, and just like how Asians and African Americans have a different skeletal structure than Caucasians do, it's true in Native Americans. Even though it has somewhat evolved, it is still biologically different. Because of the easily identifiability of Native Americans, they have kind of created this new self-pride, and they kind of carry their easily identifiability on their backs with them, and they use it as a way to enhance their culture. Even though being easily identifiable does lead to them having more stereotypes and judgments about the Native American community, they use it as a positive. And due to the isolation of Native Americans on the reservations and also being forced in different areas, this leads them to be more easily identifiable because they are in one specific area typically. And because of this, they also use it as a positive because they use it as a way to enhance their forgotten culture. So because they're all in one place, typically they try to create a strong culture and not let the white dominant culture influence them. They also have a we-ness or togetherness, and due to the fact that they are segregated a lot of the time, just like above how they are easily identifiable, they interact with the members of their tribe, and so that leads them to having a togetherness that is really hard to break. They also have strong bonds between family members and elders, and their tribal community is a very strong support system. And just like any other minority group, they have a very strong togetherness, which keeps them together. They participate in endogamy like other minority groups. To be honest, we couldn't find too much information about this. There wasn't anything specifically that said they do participate in endogamy over other intermarriage. But from the statistics in the book, it showed that a majority of the time Native Americans do marry and have children within their minority group, and a lot of the times when they don't, it is with other tribal members, so not a certain tribe, but a different tribe, so both Native Americans together. And then I also thought it was interesting because on the bottom part there with the mixed races, it was quite high with whites and then very, very low with blacks and others, so like Latinos and Asians. So I thought it was interesting because of the past oppression with whites, which we'll tell you about, but still that they do assimilate with white culture. And then the 4 million number in the book was also kind of confusing because it said other ethnics, but then it defined that as the other tribes, so that was just confusing. I wasn't sure on that, but through our research we kind of just said that they do participate in Bdmv, and the research shows that. Obviously, all minority groups are powerless. Later on in our presentation, we're going to give you the history of the oppression, but you guys, I assume, all know about Columbus and the Indians and how they were forced from their land. And there was an interesting statistic that I had no idea about until I was doing research, and on the screen you can see that within 200 years there was a population of 2.5 million Native Americans, and that went down to only 200,000. And this is known to the Native Americans as the American Holocaust, which nobody really recognizes, like just how the Jewish Holocaust is incredibly not famous but well known, but nobody really knows how many Native Americans lost their lives when the Europeans came to the United States. And since then, the Native American population has been increasing significantly. The 2014 statistics says that there are 5.2 Native Americans residing in the U.S., but 51% of that is in combination with other races, so that statistic is a little bit blurry. They are also powerless because they have very limited access to resources, because a lot of them do live on reservations or in specific areas. They don't have good access to healthcare, education, and other things, which we'll talk about later. And then for the status, like minority groups are given an ascribed status at birth. This part was a little bit blurry to us as well, because we couldn't find anything for sure that said Native Americans do have an ascribed status over an achieved status, but we were kind of in the middle on this one, because when Native Americans are born, they are given the status of their parent, but being Native Americans, you don't look down upon someone who has an achieved status. For an example, I said, like, if you're at the very low end of the Native American tribe, but you end up being the greatest hunter out of all of them, you're not going to be allowed to move up because you come from the lower end of the Native Americans. And then also, like how Native Americans strongly believe in the respect for their elders, you're obviously not born an elder, and your parent doesn't have to be an elder. But it's the stuff that you do in your life and the ways that you treat people and the attitude that you have that helps you become an elder. So we were kind of just iffy on the achieved status versus the ascribed status. So they do have an ascribed status at birth, but it's not looked down upon for them to have an achieved status. So they do fit the 5 categories of a minority group. They kind of are iffy on some of them, but obviously Native Americans are powerless, and that's the biggest one that makes them a minority group. Okay, so now we are going to talk to you about the core cultural elements. First, there's clothing. This is a huge, huge, huge part of Native American culture, currently and in the history. Weaving, beading, and feathering are all ways that clothing is made, not specifically much anymore, but that's a lot how it is still made currently. It's a huge part of religious ceremonies and other cultural things, especially the headdresses. They use headdresses to symbolize power, and if you're an elder, and the feathers and the symbols on them represented the deeds that you did in life and your occupation and stuff. So headdresses and other clothing was a huge part of the religious ceremonies. Native Americans are resourceful, and they never waste anything. So all the animals that they killed, they used everything to make clothes out of it and also to eat them. Because of their respect for nature, which we'll talk about later, they used all the animal skin, quills from porcupines, and feathers from eagles were all used to make clothing. They believe that these animals should be respected and treated with dignity because they gave up their lives for these Native Americans to use. And also, women are the ones who typically make clothing. It's that, like, it'd be rare to see a Native American man have anything to do with the clothing making process. They used all kinds of symbols on the clothing to represent status and power, and family relationships were always honored during these because a lot of the times the women would work really hard to get things done before the ceremonies. Women typically wore dresses, skirts, leggings with a tunic, and and sweaters and shawls and beaded jackets for the colder months. And men typically wore, a long time ago obviously, wore a breechcloth that covered the front and back of their body. And sometimes when it got cold they wore leggings, but they were shirtless the majority of the year. Native Americans invented their moccasins, which are made out of soft leather or a thick boot called a mukluk. And there's kind of been variations used around like popular culture that even uses moccasins and mukluks now. There are currently a lot of Native American museums, and in there's clothing put on display because of its intricate detail and also its huge tie with their culture. Typically now Native Americans don't sport around the animal skins and stuff like that made, but during their religious ceremonies they do wear the headdresses and the cultural wear during all those ceremonies. And next, food. So you guys got to try some of the Native American dishes. Obviously they weren't authentic, but we tried. For their food, Native Americans, they hunted, they fished, they gathered, and they farmed a lot of their food. Indians kind of became famous for their Indian corn or maize, and that is pretty much what they ate with everything in a lot of different ways. Native American crops also included beans, squash, pumpkin, sunflower, wild rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, peanuts, avocados, papaya, and chocolate, which I found was interesting. Native Americans loved meat. They obviously hunted and killed a lot of animals, and they had to survive that way. Some of those included buffalo, elk, deer, caribou, rabbit, salmon, and other fish, along with ducks, geese, and turkeys. And when we were looking for recipes, a majority of them had buffalo meat in them, and obviously we weren't going to go out and get you guys buffalo meat to eat, but that must have been their favorite dish. Like I said about the clothing, they strongly believed in not wasting anything, so everything the animal would be eaten whenever it could be. Nuts and fruit, like pine nuts and cashews, along with sugar, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, and plums were popular in their diet. And then, like Jackie talked about, the three sisters, known as bean, corns, and squash, are the main foods in almost every single meal for Native American food. The fry bread was actually created once the Europeans came, and they gave them flour and lard, which they've never had before, and that's where it came from. And I thought it was interesting because they said that Native American fry bread is something that's passed along through generations, and it's allowing the Native Americans to keep their generations going, but it also reminds them of a painful past. So I thought that was interesting that something like that could continue going. And then also we found that Native Americans typically only drink water with their meals, but a lot of them would brew tea specifically from the things that they found in nature. And we can go next. Here are just some typical clothing and foods from Native Americans. The squash, beans, and corn, the fry bread, and the moccasins, and the meat, and then in the upper corner is the breechcloth. Obviously, Native American men typically don't wear those anymore, but that's what they wore before. And then there's a typical outfit for a female in Native American society. Okay, so recreation was kind of hard to find for the Native American group. I found that it was typically synonymous with their religion, so whenever they created a game, they wanted it to describe a Native American religion or something to do with their culture, and these games were typically passed through each generation, just like everything else in the Native American culture. Hunting is often seen as a recreation for Native Americans, even though it does provide a livelihood and food and clothing. It is also something used for leisure. I didn't know this, but apparently I couldn't find anything specific that said Native Americans invented lacrosse, but I guess it was a huge game for them to play, and a lot of children actually died from playing lacrosse because it was so violent, but they would play it from sun up to sundown every single day, and apparently that might have been where it originated from. And now parents are enrolling their children into institutionalized sports teams and activities, and one of these particular programs is the Native American Youth and Family Center, and it offers different recreational services, sports, and clinics for Native American families. And I found that interesting that there is just one place located for specifically Native Americans just for recreation. And next, their language. Like most ethnic subcultures, Native Americans do have their own language. There is not a specific type of Native American language, but there are many different variations, and I found research that said there are between 700 and 800 different Native American languages around the world, and currently there are 25 million people who can speak the U.S. Indigenous Native American language, but there's a danger of the language becoming extinct because now a lot of parents aren't teaching their children what they know about the Native American language, and so it's kind of just dwindling down, and a lot of children aren't knowing it, and they're not teaching their children, so they're afraid in a few generations the Native American language will be lost. The Native American language is polysynthetic, which means that a number of word elements are joined together to form a composite word. So instead of saying I'm searching for my lost horse, there's one single word in the Native American vocabulary that speaks for the whole sentence, and that's how their whole language consists of. It just kind of combines words together. There are a lot of Native American languages, and they do not follow all one specific way, but it is in danger, and if the parents of the children in school right now don't keep pushing towards it, it might be lost in the future. Okay, their economy. Before in history, their economy was based on hunting and gathering, and to survive, they had to make a profit on hunting and gathering their goods, which they would later sell. After the Europeans came to America, the Native Americans had to change that because they kind of lost their ability to do certain things. The Native Americans developed a great economy once they started to cultivate corn, and they became really good at it and started making a big profit. But currently, and unfortunately, the Native Americans are underrepresented and have very little influence in the market economy in the United States. New laws were passed so that Native Americans profit off the land that they live on reservations, and they're allowed to rent out the land and also rent out to private tenants, so that allows them to make money, and they can also use wind power and water power on the reservations by using their natural resources to save money. I'm not going to talk a lot about casinos, but it said that they're also a major economical advantage because a lot of Native American states are separate from the government, so that allows them to have their own restrictions, and they're allowed to make a profit by opening and running the casinos. So even though they do have a couple financial barriers, they do have financial freedom. A large percentage of Native Americans are still poor, and the economy is becoming a lot more positive for them, but it's not where it should be. Even for a minority group, it is still, the poverty line is still very, very high. For art, art and music are really, really important in Native Americans because they use it in almost every single religious ceremony. Art is seen as boundless and sacred, and it's a way to be expressive in the Native American culture, and it's also seen as a way to worship and praise the gods. Every piece of art was used to show beauty and care for nature and also respect their loved ones. It consists of painting, basket weaving, carving, pottery, and rug making, and that was a long time ago when they still lived in the teepees and huts and everything, but currently there are still a lot of Native Americans who still make a livelihood on making authentic Native American art. They came up with the use of geometric shapes, which are now known as tribal patterns, and lately it's been on like every single shirt and stuff, or in every store, so tribal patterns are really popular, and that came from the Native Americans. Music is a way to worship the gods also, as it is seen that music is the language of the spirits which they worship, and each tribe has a different style of music and also a style of dance that is used, along with different instruments, so it kind of varies from each tribe which one they prefer. Dance, along with art and music, is used in every single religious ceremony. Each dance and song has its own special name, step, and history and meaning. And the traditional instruments of Native Americans include drums, rattles, whistles, and flutes. And every song and music in a Native American culture is about a specific ritual, but it's also a way to be incorporated into everyday life. And art and music and dance are ways for the traditions of Native Americans to be passed through generations, and that's how they keep going, is because they want to share these things that they learn. And it's also used as an educational tool to teach the future Native American generations about what they've gone through and about their religion as they pass it on. And those are some pictures of the basket weaving. That's a pottery that was made. That was a picture of a Native American woman that was painted. And those are some of the traditional dances during the ceremonies. Their clothing is obviously very intricate, and they wear face paint, and I think that looks like a talking stick that the guy's holding almost, but, so yeah. Okay, so their religion is obviously very important to them. It's what makes up their being, and this part was kind of confusing, but I read that Native Americans don't see their religion like Christians do, and they believe that Europeans almost practice it because they have to, but they believe their culture is something that is deep, deep inside of them and makes up every part of them, is their spirituality and their religion. Also, they practice a lot of Christianity because when Europeans came, they forced on their religion, and even though that kind of was a negative, a lot of Native Americans do practice Christianity, but with different tie-ins of Native American culture. So I found at least 12 different specific religions that are still practiced today, but I'm just going to explain a couple. The first is Christianity, which makes up a large part of the Native American religion, and it was brought over by the Europeans and the missionaries who taught during the time of the Native American rebellion. And the Native Americans, right now, the Native Americans who admit to being Christian, they say that they believe the same things that Christians do, but they also incorporate aspects of Native American culture and life in it, so that they aren't just getting rid of Native American culture completely, just like how they had to in the past when they believed in Christianity. The next is called the Indian Shaker religion, and this was founded by an island member, and the name of it comes from the shaking and twitching motions that were used by first participants to brush off their sins, so I thought that was interesting. This combines Christianity with Indian teaching, and it's still used today by a large amount of Native Americans. Another religion is called the Longhouse religion, and this was founded by the Iroquois tribe, and this is still practiced today by almost every Iroquois tribal member, and it combines Iroquois beliefs with Christianity. Another one is ghost dances, and this means that ghost dances are meant to serve as a connection with the way of life and honor the dead while predicting their resurrection, so it's kind of got some different elements in there, but it also is a combination of Christianity and Native American beliefs, and it's still practiced today by a lot of Native Americans. Other religions I found were called the feather religion, drum religion, and dream dance. And these aren't prominently used anymore, but they were still used for a long time ago. Sundance is a very popular Native American ceremony. It's held in a private and secret location, just like all their religious ceremonies, but I couldn't exactly find a lot of research about it on the internet because it's so private, because they don't want outside influence coming in and seeing what is going on. I read that there are dances and songs, they do fasting and skin piercing and praying, so it's something that they do during their religion, and I guess it's a really big part of the Native American culture. There have been a lot of legal issues regarding Native American religion about what they are and aren't allowed to do. A couple of these acts include the Indian Religious Freedom Act, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. So now we already kind of went over the agriculture and nature, just like the foods. Native Americans were good farmers, and they had to be to kind of create a livelihood, and that's how they stayed alive. Like I said before, they didn't want to waste anything, so they harvested or killed and used every single thing that they could once they did that. Nature is very important to the Native Americans, like I already said. Native Americans define themselves by the land, and they said that it is a sacred and bounded place that shapes their world. They recognize it as a unity within their physical and spiritual universe, and it also connects them between the natural and supernatural world. They believe that each form of life, like plants and animals, even have a spirit, and so once they kill these things and eat them, they have to honor them while they're eating, and so they shared their lives, and their lives were in tune with the spirits of nature. They treat the nature with respect and dignity at all times, and this is kind of where the 7 generations principle comes into play. And so the 7 generation principle is referred to as decision making that is sustainable for 7 generations into the future. So once they would plant crops and once they made decisions about agriculture and nature, they wanted to make sure that the 7 generations into the future would still be able to live and do well off what they were doing now in regards to agriculture and nature. So they always wanted to protect and serve and do well with the nature. When working with Native Americans, you'll always want to remember that spirituality and nature go hand in hand, and they're synonymous with each other. So that's always something you want to keep in mind with the Native American. Government, I had no idea about this until I started researching, but Native Americans have their own tribal governments. There are 566 federally recognized Indian nations, and those could be tribes or villages in the United States, and approximately 229 of these have 229 of these are located in Alaska, and the other ones are located around the states. There have been treaties and laws created so that since Native Americans were taken away from their land and they are forced to live somewhere else, the government guaranteed them that they were able to govern their own areas. So they have tribal and self-government of the Native American areas that they reside on, and this ensures that the Indian nations are able to be a distinct people and also rule over their land themselves and not be under the rule of the United States government. Tribal governments provide opportunities that otherwise wouldn't exist for the people. They also build the bridges and roads and are in charge of the law enforcement, education, and judicial systems of all Native American nations. Self-government is essential for every tribe simply because it keeps the culture of Native Americans in tune and also allows every Native American to keep their identity. Education. I also didn't know about this as Native Americans, and it kind of made me upset that I didn't know more about it, but when the Europeans came, they killed off a lot of the Native Americans, and then when they started realizing, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill all these people, they wanted to make them become white. So they created these Native American boarding schools where all the Native American children went to. And from what I read, it was a terrible, terrible place, and all the children were typically physically or mentally or sexually abused. And the purpose of the school was to whiten these children and make them forget and hate their Native American culture and identity. So there's been a lot of backlash and a lot of mental health issues from Native Americans, specifically just from these boarding schools. And after they had stopped, there was just a lot of issues about Native Americans not wanting their children to go to school. So a lot of them are homeschooled now in the reservations. In 1994, a federal act called Title IX was put in place for all American Indians, and it provides funds to school systems specifically for Indian education, so that is a big step for Native American education. However, less than 1% of students in the U.S. school system are Native American, so that is very, very low. Performance and graduation rates of Native Americans have also been gradually falling in the recent years, and I couldn't find specific information that said why, but it, like between 2008 and 2010 compared to now, the rates were a little bit higher, so the graduation and the performance rate is decreasing. Due to living on reservations, American Indians, they have extremely less access to higher education. The government provided tribal colleges and universities just like a tribal government, but they operate on or near the reservations, and there are only 33 of them in the United States, so that makes them kind of hard to gain access to. Just like in the public school system, Native Americans earn less than 1% of the overall college graduate degrees that are awarded. Native Americans, 76.2% have a high school diploma, 12.7% with a college degree, and 4.7% with a graduate degree, but these numbers are significantly lower than the numbers with whites, so that's very, very sad. Due to the oppression and isolation of Native Americans, they just have way less access to education. Even though Native American parents are encouraging their children to gain an education currently, they're still just not where they should be. And there's an association now, National Indian Education Association, organizes and coordinates education for Native students by advocating, researching, and capacity building education for all Native Americans. So they are trying to make positive steps, but they're just not where they should be yet. And now it's my history.
Okay, so I'm just going to be talking about the core culture elements that Dr. King told us that are like in all cultures. So human nature, they have a really big emphasis on living in harmony, and they emphasize like the inherent goodness of people, so they're always sharing with each other and they want to help each other. And they're all about celebrating people's unique differences, and because they want to live in harmony, they're always really patient and humble. Community is important. They believe that we're all interconnected as part of the universe, and so they have a really big belief in fatalism, like what will be, and like the events that happen are meant to happen, so it's not a big deal. And while people will see that as passive, it's really just a core belief. For communication, they prefer listening to talking, and this is really important for like us going to social work. Listening is a lot more important, and it's an important value to them, and it goes along with them having patience. They think it's really important to be able to be patient and fully listen to what people are saying. They discourage talking for the sake of talking. Like, they think there needs to be a purpose in order to talk. So because they understand like the power of words, they choose their words really carefully and slowly. So while people might be thinking like, oh, they're like really slow, it's just because they don't want to like just talk to talk. Oral tradition and storytelling is really important in Native American culture, so that's why listening is a skill that they work on. In terms of quietness or silence, people think it makes them look indifferent, but it's really just a part of their etiquette. In silence, they're able to watch, listen, and then act, and it signifies self-control. They said that it's contrary to white men, where talking is rewarded and everyone's talking over one another. This from this article, it says, "We Indians know about silence, we aren't afraid of it. In fact, to us it is more powerful than words. Watch, listen, and then act, they told us. This is the way to live. Always watch first with a still heart and mind, and then you learn. When you have watched enough, then you can act." With the white people, it is just the opposite. You learn by talking, and you reward the kids who talk the most in school. At your parties, everyone is talking all at once. In your work, you have meetings where everyone interrupts everyone else. You say it's working out a problem. To us, it just sounds like a bunch of people saying whatever comes into their head without listening. So that's really important to them. No eye contact. Eye contact is seen as aggressive to them, so to them it's like disrespectful, especially with those that are older or in higher authority. So as a social worker, they wouldn't want to give you eye contact right away because they would see it as disrespectful because you're higher in authority, and since they always want to maintain harmony. The lack of such is not supposed to be seen as rude or anything like that. So they're reserved, goes along with being quiet and listening. They don't like to self-disclose with people that they don't have a personal relationship with. So again, that's social workers, so that's when you need to like gain their trust first. They exercise caution when it comes to self-disclosure, and their information about themselves or their family is usually kept to themselves if they don't know you. Time is seen as flexible. The right time is when someone is ready. They think that to break off a discussion to someone to keep another appointment would be rude and offensive. So social work, we deal with schedules and like scheduling times. They would see it as really rude if we were like, oh, okay, it's 4 o'clock, you need to leave. To them, when we're done talking and when the conversation has come to a close, that is when it's the right time. It's cyclical, not linear like we think it is. It's a repeating process like the seasons, so they see things in a very natural event, like it says, and they focus on the present. They are really important in living in the present instead of planning for the future. A lot of Native American languages don't have any words for time or like words to denote a future tense. Fatalistic, like we said, what will be, and then measured by natural events. Space, they're really into compact living. Because they used to all live in like long houses or teepees, families live together, and someone living alone would be seen as pitied, and they like to have frequent contact with friends and family. They value sharing. The whole point, they maintain harmony, and we're all connected, so they share their home. When it comes to personal space, though, they like to have adequate space, and if you were to like intrude on them, it'd be rude, and like they don't necessarily like to be touched if it's not for a reason, so touch is not appreciated necessarily. For the environment, like Cody talked about, they utilize their natural resources when it comes to hunting and farming. They're respectful of their environment because they believe in harmony in nature, and they don't believe in progress at the expense of others or nature. So to like cut down nature to expand would be unheard of for them. For gender roles and family, it's really important to remember that it consists of the extended family. So again, social work, you need to think about their entire extended family when dealing with your clients. A large network of relatives provides support and a strong sense of security. So that would be their support system, not just their nuclear family. Grandparents are really important. They're sometimes seen as more important than parents. They are key decision makers for the family. And since the elderly are seen as wise, they're very respected and revered. And they have shared roles within the family. Like women actually have a really big part in Native American culture. They might have had really different roles, but they were still viewed pretty equally. Women didn't really have political power, but they did have signatures on treaties, no signatures on treaties, but they did own the land and the right to crops, and even had the right to divorce. Within the family, people are supposed to take care of each other, so whether that means aunts and uncles taking care of nieces and nephews, but they'll call each other mother, father, daughter, son. And you should always seek the advice of the family when you make a decision. It's the importance of the community, so as to serve the whole, not just the individual. So when it comes to interpersonal relationships, we have the 7th generation principle, like Cody was talking about. Each generation is supposed to consider the effects of their actions, and it's supposed to live on to the 7th generation. The individual is supposed to be quiet, patient, humble, and respectful, and those are all the qualities that we talked about before, and always maintain interpersonal harmony, especially within the family, and be accepting of others. That's okay, I'll just talk about it. So for one of the parts is formality, and so the emphasis on tradition and etiquette, they talk about how much it is important to retain native languages. When it comes to success, they don't really, when it comes to success, they don't want to be individuals don't want to be the center of attention. Success as a group is more important, so there's an emphasis on us. For help-seeking behavior, counseling for the group is much more important than just the individual, and like we talked about, they can be really reserved to people that they don't know well, like their social worker. And so they're going to be hesitant to answer direct questions and possibly the assessment part until you get to know them. So the engagement process should probably be a really big part of your interaction with them. you have to realize like the community as a whole, and so the counseling should be geared towards the community. So when it comes to individualism versus collectivism, once again, they want harmony and success in the group and focus on the community. In the being versus doing versus being and becoming, they're actually a being culture, not a being and becoming culture. They're really focused on what they are in the present and who they are in the present, and they're not as worried about what they do or achievement oriented. They're a high context culture, so nonverbal behavior and communication is important, like we talked about, listening, no eye contact, being silent. Their main goal is to express their harmony. I keep saying that a lot, but it's just really important. They are an egalitarian community, even though it doesn't seem like that because they have like tribal leaders and whatnot. Everyone has different roles, but they're seen relatively equal and very important to the goodness of the group. They are very focused on cooperation rather than competition. In the past, cooperation was necessary to survive. Like, people were hunters and people were farmers, so they worked together. Competition in sports, like Cody was talking about, like lacrosse, is fine because they're like just having fun in it and they're all together as a group, but no one should seek together, like an individual shouldn't seek like the center of attention, but instead be together as a group and cooperate. Okay, so the past oppression. So Cody talked about the decreasing numbers in their population. Prior to the Europeans coming, they had 16 to 17 million in their population, and it decreased by genocide. So what had happened was, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard like Christopher Columbus like brought all these like Western diseases that they had no idea how to like shield themselves from. So that ruined their numbers, and also the whole thing of like getting displaced from their land. They were forced to move all the time, and they were also killed in the war that we had. But of course, we don't really talk about it in our education. But we do talk about manifest destiny, so that although it's usually seen as a really positive thing in our education, that Europeans had the right to take Native American land, but that really was just like oppressing them and then forcing them to relocate all the time. So laws that were put into place, the Dawes Act of 1887, they had to test people's blood in order to identify as Indian, in order to get government treatment, and that would determine whether or not they got land. A lot of times, like, they only needed like 51%, but people would be like 50%, but identify completely as Native American. So then, because of that, they wouldn't get land. So that's kind of unfair if it's just determined by percentages. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, again, it's like relocating the Native American nations. And so it was just meant to open up territory for the settlement of Europeans. And formal education, Cody talked about the boarding schools that they had. It was really meant to assimilate Native Americans into white culture, but it was really more like get rid of their native culture, and it's meant to be like a conversion. And so the loss of land undercut the Native Americans' economic infrastructure, led to poverty, low income, and unemployment.
So the present oppression of the Native Americans is actually comparable to the history. The poverty rate is still very, very high. It has decreased in the past decades, but it's still not where it should be. 25% of Native Americans still live below the poverty line, compared to 10% of whites and 13% of the total population, so that is incredibly high. The poverty rate increases the other dysfunctions that they have, like lack of access to healthcare and education, and that leads through the poverty cycle, which we learned about, so it's just really hard to get out of poverty. Housing is also an issue for Native Americans. They tend to have lower quality homes compared to whites and other members of the dominant society. They typically live in mobile homes, even on the reservations. They live in a small home, which occupies a lot of people, like Jackie was talking about, how they're used to it, but they just live in a small home, and the bedrooms occupy more people than should be allowed. Native American homes currently typically have less access to running water, complete kitchens, and telephones. Even now, currently, housing is still a huge issue. In the 1960s, they tried to alleviate overcrowding of the Native American culture, but 40% of Native Americans still live in overcrowded houses. 25% of Native Americans still do live on the government-regulated reservations, and they are separated and isolated from the general population. 15% live almost exactly on or near the reservations, but they aren't technically on the reservation. And 40% of Native Americans don't live on the reservation, but they're segregated from the dominant neighborhoods and territories. And like I said in the beginning, they use this isolation as a way to recapture their vanishing identity. So they're trying to turn it into a positive. Lifespan is a big issue. Like Jackie was saying, that when the Europeans came, they brought a lot of diseases that the Native Americans couldn't fight off, and that led to a lot of deaths. The Native Americans, however, are far likely to die from less diseases than other races. Native Americans are far less likely to die from heart disease and cancer compared to Latinos and African Americans. But they do not have access to health care, and they're one of the minority groups that have the least access to health care when you put them all together. 31% of Native Americans do not have health insurance, and that figure is 3 times larger than those compared to whites, and 10 times higher compared to blacks, and 15 times higher than Asians. So they're just really at the bottom. The infant mortality rate is also 3.5 times higher than it is for whites. And I thought this was interesting that violence is a huge factor among Native American deaths. In our textbook, it said that Native Americans are twice as likely to die from homicide compared to whites, and also twice as likely to die in an auto accident compared to whites. So I didn't know what that had to do with violence, but it was just an interesting fact for their lifespan. Educational attainment, like I already talked about, they earn less than 1% of the undergraduate and graduate degrees. The most notable difference is noted in the post-secondary level, and education is something that brings success and allows you to get out of the poverty cycle, but because Native Americans don't have good access to it, it leads to lower paying jobs. Occupational distribution, Native Americans are underrepresented in the white collar jobs and also overrepresented in the low paying service jobs. And occupational distribution for Native Americans is typically based on their residential patterns, so those who live on the reservations and those who don't get different jobs. In the book, it talked about how Native Americans living on the reservations are more likely to be employed at blue-collar jobs compared to those who live off the reservation. The government has created jobs for Native Americans, specifically for Native Americans, on the reservations, but they're typically low paying and they do not create a steady income or a healthy lifestyle for any Native American. Okay, like the prayer I found earlier, I thought this was interesting, especially to put it after the oppression. It's the Native American prayer for white men, so I'm just going to read it to you guys. And now, grandfather, I ask you to bless the white man. He needs your wisdom, your guidance. You see, for so long he has tried to destroy my people and only feels comfortable when given power. Bless them, show them the peace we understand, teach them humility. For I fear they will someday destroy themselves and their children, as they have done so, Mother Earth. I plead, I cry, after all, they are my brothers. So that's just something that shows the character of a Native American man and how they still, after all the suppression they've been dealing with, they still have the heart to pray for the white man. So that was interesting. Okay, so the book that I read was about the 12 core values of the Native American, and also doing our research, we found that there are different aspects and values that Native Americans follow. Every single Native American must follow them. The ones up on the screen: humility, perseverance, respect, honor, love, sacrifice, compassion, bravery, fortitude, wisdom, truth, generosity, and gratitude. All these things are a part of a Native American being, and you must treat others with these, and you must show these in every aspect of your life to be a true Native American, because these are the things that they value. Okay, so now we're gonna have a little story time, and Jackie is gonna come around to you guys and give you a stone, and you guys are gonna pick 2 of the pebbles, and on the stones are Native American symbols, and on the back is the word that the symbol means. And long ago, stories were used in Native American culture to tell stories of religion and also the core values, and they were passed from generation to generation. And when they didn't have a language, they used symbols to describe certain things in their culture, and this is how they told stories, was by their symbols. So we're gonna have you guys tell us a story by using your Native American symbols that you just got, and your story has to represent or involve one of the core values that we just showed you guys. So we'll give you a couple minutes to think, but if nobody volunteers, we're gonna pick on you guys, so. And we were gonna have, oh, you have candy? And we have candy, but if we were gonna have Dr. King do one, but she's obviously not here today, so if we could have just like 2 or 3.
Double-sided.
They should have the like word on the back.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll just give you guys a couple of minutes to think about it, but we can put up the core value list again. Okay. So yeah. Be creative, and we will pick on you if we don't get a volunteer.
It doesn't have to be extravagant.
Yeah,
No,
it is
it's
exciting.
Are we putting them together or one for?
You can do whatever you want. If you want to put them together and create one story, that's good. Or if you want to create 2 stories, that's good too.
Is it about the items or is it like?
Yeah. Try to make
Here,
it
I'll
up.
make an example really quick. It's gonna be awful, but okay. So I have dancer and wise, and so basically, I mean, it's really like, it just has to be really short, but like, so this dancer was really, really good at what she did, and so dancer was really good at what she did, and she was valued for her wisdom in the art of dance. But she showed humility in what she did, because no individual should have to be like above the group. So she was just humble. Dang, no. Okay.
And you can even put in a Native American name if you want to. You can come up with that. So, do we have any volunteers?
Mine was obviously not good, so don't feel pressured.
I'll go.
Okay, thank you, Tia.
Yep. I have Warren Bear. So I'm going to say, a soldier must be brave while still giving respect, and to honor the nature with the bear, with humility and wisdom.
What? That was wonderful.
Great job.
Would you like a Kit Kat or M&M's?
M&M.
Please don't hit anyone.
Another volunteer? Anybody?
Hello.
Alyssa?
Okay, I have Eagle and Indian camp. And so, just like in a camp, you have to respect each other, and then they also have respect for the animals, including the eagle. So,
There you go.
Great job. Do we have one more person?
Alyssa, Kit Kat or M&M's?
Dana?
Okay, I have women in headdress. The women were seeing respect, honor, and love. So she wore a headdress for her wisdom.
Great job.
Great story.
We'll go Kit Kat.
Okay.
Okay.
I had arrow and mountains, and I shot an arrow at a deer, and it ran away. but I had the perseverance to climb all through the mountains, day and night searching for it until I tracked it down and it showed fortitude.
So good, okay.
That was a great story.
I'm gonna sleep.
Okay, does anybody else want to go? Nathaniel? Okay. You want to conclude?
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh. Okay. Okay. So that's really all we have for today. So today we just like went over how Native Americans are defined as a minority group. We just looked at elements of their core culture and the ones that are present in all cultures. We've seen like the events that have happened in their past and how they've been oppressed, and even like laws that have been put into place that bring on oppression and their current oppression. And we've seen how it affects like jobs, education, their lifespan, housing, and the poverty rate. Next class, we talked a little bit about it today, but the next class will be mostly like social work implications and practice. I will probably email my notes to you guys because that stuff will go into the social work part, and I think I will quiz on things like that. So
Yeah.
that's all I have for today. Help yourself to more food. Don't feel pressured to though.
What are the teepee foods?
Oh, they're like cake inside of a waffle and a sugar.
Yeah, we should do that. You
Oh my
grab
gosh.
the camera and like show her. Yeah, but don't forget your self-awareness journal today and give us good feedback and tell us what you did.
We'll cut that out. It doesn't work if it's not plugged in.
Oh, I'll just take
We'll just take
pictures.
pictures.